Welcome back to the Reusable Space Program. This is episode 12, and you find us on Minmus with Scott Kerbin, who's doing some science, but he can't call home. I think we need to figure out that somehow, don't we? So, yeah, Scott is stuck on Minmus. Well, he's not stuck, he's going to come back, but he can't actually talk to anybody because he doesn't have a communication system. He has a very short-ranged antenna, but we're going to take this mission here to go to Minmus and put a satellite around it. But we're not going to send just one, we're going to send a constellation. We're going to send 4 of them because we want to make sure that we can actually have sort of communications coverage over the entire surface of the planet. And if we put them in equatorial orbits, which the mission has asked us to put one in, we should be able to have that. So here you can see we're just putting our little craft together. This is Com1 or Com-A, I can't remember which one I actually called it in the end, with a very original naming system. 2 docking ports, a couple of engines, and some antennas that we're going to strap on there with some solar panels. It's very basic, and we're going to stand 4 of them up. So here we are, this is the craft. It's a modification of the X5 that you saw last time. This is the X5B. You can see I've changed the nose, basically. We've changed it for a nose that doesn't have fuel in it, just because the idea of fuel going past our cargo bay just seems very odd to me. We've also put some extra fuel tanks around the base of the craft to give it the more longer burning first stage. So there we go. You notice we don't tilt over until we get to about 20 kilometers because this thing is not the most stable. Interestingly, you will see that Sean Kerbin is actually in the driving seat, but there is no visible driving seat. He does seem to be buffeting around an awful lot though in there. That's because he is riding around with the satellites and a new craft that we have developed. That's right, technology has advanced significantly on Kerbin, or more accurately, more significantly for the Reusable Space Program. We got hold of ourselves probably an old nuclear reactor or something. Yeah, because Kerbals aren't dangerous enough. We've now got nuclear engines. Yes, our scientists have pushed themselves to develop this. Now, I don't expect this craft to come back down into the Kerbin atmosphere. If it does, I will probably have to put it inside another craft to bring it down, just to be safe. The nuclear engine is very heavy, so this is probably I could have gone with a normal engine for this, if I'm entirely honest. It would have probably given us enough delta V, but I wanted to try the nuclear engine out because I just want to see, you know, can it aerobrake? Can it actually be usable on small craft? Because I have ideas of using it. So Sean plots for Minmus and off he goes with his nuclear engine. Now you can see it's a beautiful little thing with his stack of satellites on the top. Get back to those satellites now. They all have 2 docking ports, so if we decide that actually we don't want to use a communication system around Minmus, we can pick them up. I mean, it'd be a bit of a faff, but we could dock with them and we could collect them and bring them back and use them for something else. So here you'll see, trying to actually get an interaction with Minmus. We're trying to get some sort of flyby situation, and ideally I want to go equatorially, but we seem to be coming in polar, so I sort of give up at this point and just go, right, let's just burn the thing. And interestingly, we actually come in at a much better angle than was predicted, and I do a little bit of burning backwards and forwards, retrograde and prograde. Anyway, we come into the sphere of influence, and all we need to do is this little tiny burn now to circularize, to capture. We're not going to go into a circular orbit. What we're actually trying to do is just dump these satellites into a usable orbit. This is not going to be their final orbit. But first, we're going to sort the inclination out. We want to be on a 0 inclination, or more accurately, we want to be on the same inclination as where our craft are. So you can see we've got our command pod there with Nacott orbiting Minmus at the moment, and I want to be on the same plane as that, just for communication ease more than anything else, and also it makes it easier for me to identify junk. So once Sean has dropped that off, he flies off and he fires his engines and heads back to Kerbin. And it's going to take him a few hours to get there, a day possibly. I don't know. He's been traveling for a while. It takes a few days. It's not the moon. It's a long journey. I think it's taking him 12 days to get to where he is now. So probably in 12 days' time he'll be heading into the atmosphere of Kerbin. But we'll put him in the barbecue roll and leave him to it. So now we're going to look at these satellites. We're going to they're in a lot of elliptical orbit at the moment. And its period is about 2.5 hours. the periapse altitude, if I circularize it, should give them an orbital period of about 2 hours. That means that if I one by one release them and then circularize every time they go round, so I basically every orbit one of them gets circularized, they will have a half an hour of delay between their position, which basically, if you think of it like a clock that only has 2 hours on it, would put them at the sort of 4 points, or roughly in the 4 points. And that means that we're going to get coverage. Now, I could do this with 3 satellites. You could technically do it with 2, although Minmus is quite mountainy, so yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the rules are in Kerbal regarding the accuracy of signal through mountain body and things like that. But 4 gives us a nice coverage, particularly for a planetary body this size. It's not very big. Minmus you could drive around. Okay. So we're going to do that. So the first one we're going to circularize there, and you'll see we're going to just tap its orbital period down to about near 2 hours. And what I actually do is I actually take a note of that time, because I'm not so much obsessed with them being perfectly balanced orbitally as having the same periapse and apoapse, or perimin and apomin, I suppose that would be, as each other. What I'm really looking for is that their orbital periods are all the same. So it might be that the orbits don't line up perfectly, but they will all take the same time to go around the orbit, so the distance between them in the orbit will stay the same. And that's really important, because if you don't do that, if you get similar apoapse and periapse, but actually the orbital period ends up being slightly different, they will drift closer or further away to each other. And you can end up, particularly if you do missions that last a few years and you come back to Minmus or another planet, you find all your satellites have moved around. You've got 2 next to each other here and 2 next to there, and you end up with a black spot. So that's what we're trying to avoid. So we're just, every time these satellites come around, we're circularizing, and I'm really looking at that orbital period. And if you need to know where it is, it's at the very bottom left of the info screen there. You can actually see, and they're all going to be within hopefully a second or 2 of each other. And that was the aim. So that's them in position. We've now got control over those, and we're going to launch something else. I've cut out the actual launch of this because we may have a communication system around Minmus, but we don't have great communications around Kerbin. So what we're going to do is put up a communication system around Kerbin. Now, Kerbin's a bit bigger, so we're going to go for 6 satellites around Kerbin. And we don't need to use our nuclear tug that's coming back now. You can also see I'm trying something out new with this craft. I actually put landing legs on the bottom of it, because I thought, oh, that'll be interesting. We'll try and see if we can land it, because I'm concerned about landing on the ground. It might fall over and break and stuff like that. Yeah, here you can see I've actually got the satellites there. They've got slightly bigger dishes. I like these dishes for relays. I think they're just aesthetically more pleasing. So we send them up, and this is a robotic craft, which means hopefully we don't lose signal. Ironically, these things are actually going to make it easier for this craft to work. And we do the same thing again. We're looking at resonance orbits here. So we've put it into an orbit that's going to give us a set period that we can then go, right, okay, it's however much a 1/6 extra. That is basically what we're looking at. So you look at your target orbital period, add a 1/6, and that's the orbit that you want to put them in that's, elliptical. So we're going to do our first circularization. Boom, sorted. And it is just a case of rinse and repeat this with the craft over and over and over again. And you'll see just the chain. We detach one, we unfurl its solar panels, activate the engines, and you can see they're very similar to the craft that we've sent to Minmus. The difference being that we've actually got 2 of these fixed antennae instead of the retractable ones. And I just think, we had the capability to put these up there, and I thought it was just a nice little addition, because this is going to be our main communication system, hopefully, for all of our craft. And it actually means that we can now be reasonably confident in sending things a bit further and still being able to communicate with them. This will not be the final communication system that we have, because the range on these is probably not as great as we could go for, but our tech is this level at the moment. So again, we may have to add to them. They've all got docking ports, so it will either be a case of reusing them, so gathering them together and sending them somewhere else, or it might be that we actually attach something else onto it, just to augment this communication system. I don't know yet. It could be a nice recovery approach. We've not got to the point yet where we're ready to replace them. So, but we've got that option because of those docking ports. So there we go, final one, just sort it out. And you notice what I'm actually going to try and do is orientate them so that the solar panels are on the normal, so up and down, so that they can actually rotate round and catch the sun, okay? Because naturally it looks not quite right, but that's it. And there you go, there's our lovely little communication system, communicating with all of the sort of ground-based systems and communicating with Minmus. Look at that. So now, you know, Sean is able to have a chat with his, you know, friends. I don't know if he's got friends, or he can check his email maybe, although I'm not entirely sure whether the lag in the internet would, it's going to be, he'll get to play around anyway. He's doing a lot of science. Just phoning home and saying he's okay is fine. So we're going to bring back our X5B. It's coming in, you see. So it's basically just evolving a little bit as we go. We've got our solar panels on the top there, we've got our landing legs down, we've got a lot of fuel in this because, well, we could put a lot of fuel on it. Now, looking at this, you can see I'm actually skimming the ocean. If I'd have just pointed the engine a bit towards us, I could have redirected myself into the ocean. Perfect landing. As it is, I saw green and was like, oh, it's not a worry. However, at this point, I started to see mountains. Very, very tall, very pointy mountains. And yes, I have landing legs, but yes, difficult. So this was a little bit of a moment for me, because I was aware of the fact that technically we've broken a solar panel at this point, but it's fixable. We can still fix it. I was concerned about this, particularly looking at the angle that we're coming down into a big valley. This is, yeah, you can see. So what I actually did was I actually tilted the craft, or I tried to at the last second. You'll watch. I try and tilt the craft just a little bit, and that allows us to use the parachutes to pull it down and soften ourselves. So our communication system's in place. Now we've got Sean coming back to Kerbin, and this is this craft is heavy. It is really heavy, in fact. So this is going to take quite a few little pumps to go through. I'm going to speed up and I'm going to cut a lot here, because I spent a long time slowing this craft down. That nuclear engine, I think it weighs about 3 tons. The normal engines are about half a ton, if that. So it is hugely heavy on a craft this size. I did fire the engine a little bit there, and I think that was probably a mistake. I think I wasted fuel at this point, and if I was being impatient. If I was doing this again, I would probably just say ride it out. So because what we actually ended up doing was later on riding it out, and the fuel wasn't as efficient early on. I could have just, you know, I got you know, I wanted to finish it as quickly as possible. So he goes through the atmosphere, and this cycle goes on multiple times. We're basically just going to run through over and over and over again this heat, this going through the upper atmosphere, losing energy. In the end, I decided, right, what we're going to do is we're going to put him into an orbit, and it doesn't matter on the inclination or anything like that, as soon as I get down to a sensible level. And so you can see here I'm burning off a bit more fuel, because I want to bring down the apoaps to something sensible. And this did take an awful long time. It just goes on and on and on. What will actually happen is we're probably going to leave Sean in orbit and then send up a craft to get him down. But it is just something that takes an awful long time to do. So with that, and this is going to be a slightly shorter episode, because I didn't want to really push you seeing all of Sean flying through the atmosphere. What we can do is I basically pop up his orbital thing. If you look now, I'm just going to pull up. We've actually gone through now, and we're going to pull up his periaps just out of the atmosphere. You can see the concern I have is the inclination of that orbit, because that makes it does mean that I'm probably going to have to send up a special craft to him, or I can use the craft that we've actually sent to Minmus to actually try and get him back. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure on that one. So this is going to be an interesting one. We could probably launch into that orbit, but we'll see. So until next time, have a great one.